If the trench theory holds true, and we are indeed living in an age that will increasingly be defined and dominated by these soft virtues, then we're likely going to see a push towards communism as we progress further down this path in the years ahead. As we saw earlier, conservatives are individualists. Conservatives believe that each human being is a unique individual and should be dignified as such. In other words, each person should be left alone and should have the freedom to think their own thoughts, speak their own mind, and pursue their own goals according to their own personal beliefs. The liberal says you can't do that though, because if everyone has their own ideas and is free to express them as they wish, that's going to lead to arguments and debate and division and conflict and offense, and we don't want any of that. We want peace in our society. And if everyone's free to pursue their own personal goals in their own way, that's going to lead to competition and conflict and inequality. And we don't want that either. We want unity in our society. So the best way to order society, the liberal thinks, is to think more collectively about the thing. Not to think of people as individuals as such, but rather just as components of a much larger machine called society. And what we really need, the liberal thinks, is to control what all of these individual components are saying and doing so that everyone starts moving in sync with one another, moving in harmony as a collective, thinking, speaking, and acting as one organism. And if we do that, then peace and unity is going to reign. And that's the most important thing to the liberal. Now, in order for all of these individual components to start moving as one, you need a choreographer. You need someone calling the shots. You need this top-down power establishing what people are to say and do and when they're to say and do it, making sure that everyone is moving in sync and remaining completely unified. It's like in a dance troupe, you need a choreographer telling people, all these individual dancers, what the steps are and when to apply them so that they dance in unison with each other. Or it's like in an orchestra, you need a conductor telling all of these individual instruments what the notes are and when to play them so that they play in harmony with one another. And that top-down power, that choreographer in a leftist society anyway, is the government. Remember that Lefebvre and Frank discovered in their 2013 study that liberals score much more highly in the trait of dependence, whereas conservatives want to be left alone by the government to pursue their own hopes and dreams independently. Liberals want to rely on the government to bring everything together, to control, to direct, and choreograph their lives. Liberals want to depend on the government to tell them what they should do. Now, as you get further into this idea of collectivism, you reach communism. This is where a controlling government is so big that it dictates every single aspect of human life, what you think, what you say, and what you do, leaving no room at all for disruptive individual human behaviors. Communism, quote, stresses not the importance of the individual, but rather the individual as a member of the collective. Thus defined, individuals only have the right to freedom of expression if it safeguards the interests of the collective. People have the right to express their opinion, but that opinion can only be expressed if it's in the general interests of society. So it's a bit like when Henry Ford made the Model T car, and apparently he said then that the customer can have any color they want as long as it's black. Well, in a communist society, you can say anything that you want as long as it's exactly what the communist government tells you to say. Before you open your mouth, those words have to be state-sanctioned. Now, in a communist society, as we've seen, in order to maintain this perfect cohesion and unity, all individualism has to be stamped out. As we've already seen, nobody's allowed true freedom of speech because clearly that would disrupt social cohesion. Instead, the all-powerful state instructs people what they must think and say and do at all times. In communist societies, nobody's allowed to express their individuality through hairstyles or fashion either. In North Korea, for example, there are 28 state-approved hairstyles and nobody can depart from them. Everyone must look exactly the same. In communist societies, nobody's allowed to generate their own income or own their own property. After all, people having their own businesses would lead to financial inequality. Some would have more, some would have less. To avoid that division, the government owns all of the property, all of the means of production and wealth, which they distribute uniformly or as they see fit. In communist societies, so that everyone conforms to the exact same ideology, there can be no higher authority or no competing authority with the state. The state must be the one source of information and knowledge, and nothing can compete for ultimate affection within people's hearts either. Therefore, nobody's allowed to worship God in communist societies. After all, it would produce a conflict of interest if the state said one thing and God said another. So instead, the state must essentially become God in that society. For similar reasons, communist societies seek to destroy the family unit, because if parents said one thing and the government another, that would produce a conflict of interest. So instead, the government must essentially become the father and mother of the nation, the parents of the nation, so to speak. If there's to be complete cohesion, complete unity, then there must be complete reliance, dependence, and submission to this one singular, all-powerful authority, which is choreographing what people think and say and do. Now, communist countries go to extravagant and ostentatious lengths to demonstrate just how unified and choreographed they are, as though this is the most important thing in life. Earlier, we looked at how in North Korea, for example, there is this annual mass games. In them, an entire stadium of up to 109,000 people are choreographed to dance and move in complete unison with each other. In this demonstration, of course, there are no individuals, but rather just hundreds of thousands of faceless components moving as one, which again is the goal of communist societies: complete collective unity and synchronization. Now, there are many problems with this extreme collectivist idea, and we're going to dig into the problems of communism soon. But I think the most obvious problem that is being visually represented here in this video is dehumanization. Extreme collectivism, extreme focus on unity at all costs, ultimately means dehumanizing the individual. After all, if people are merely being choreographed in every area of their life, being told what to say and think and do, and their only purpose is to serve and obey the state, they're being reduced to robots, really. I mean, what does it mean to be a human after all? Human beings are the only creatures on God's earth that pursue knowledge for its own sake, to form ideas about the world. That's a uniquely human trait. And we're the only beings on God's earth with a larynx, that is a voice box, by which we can articulate our thoughts and beliefs. To deprive us of free speech, then, is to deprive us of our essential humanity. We're the only beings on earth that have the ability and desire to express ourselves through fashion, art, music, drama, books, and yes, even haircuts. To deny us free creative expression is to deny us and deprive us of our essential humanity. We're the only beings on earth with the ability to think and reason about the transcendent meaning of life, the only ones to have a conscious desire to form a relationship with God. To deny us the freedom to worship that God and to speak about that God is to deprive us of our essential humanity. So now I'm going to say something which will be quite shocking for postmodern ears, and for that reason I've got to walk very carefully as I say it. We have become so accustomed to this idea in our age that peace and unity is the most important thing in life. I mean, world peace is the great idea of our age. It is the ultimate dream for our generation. It's the dream that caused our civilization to change course back in 1967. It's the reason why we started prioritizing the soft values in the first place. It is the cliched answer that keeps everyone on side in beauty pageants, the thing that nobody would ever argue against.
I would have to say world peace. Definitely world peace.
That's easy.
World peace.
World peace.
What is the one most important thing our society needs?
That would be harsher punishment for parole violators, Stan. And world peace.
Now, world peace is a noble idea, of course it is. But when you understand that this side of heaven, in order to have total peace, you must have total unity. And if you want total unity, you must have total conformity. And if you want total conformity, you must have an authoritarian regime enforcing that conformity. It starts to sound far less appealing, and it starts to sound like tyranny. The lure that's drawing us ever further down this path is peace and unity, even world peace and unity. But the end result of that imbalanced pursuit is going to be authoritarianism. And we're already moving in that direction. As we saw in the last episode, Western governments are at this very moment moving towards the erosion of free speech. The state is pressing charges on street preachers, telling them that they're not allowed to quote the Bible in public anymore in case it offends someone. The police are harassing people like Harry Miller, phoning him to check his thinking to make sure it's falling in line with government ideology. The UK government is trying to introduce an online hate speech bill. This is all an attempt to enforce social conformity and cohesion and unity, and yet it's leading us into government-sponsored, state-sponsored tyranny. And to this I say, I don't want it. I don't want that kind of peace. Give me messy freedom over state-enforced conformity any day. Yes, even with its debates, conflicts, arguments, controversies, and offences. I will take that over government tyranny any day. As Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. Life is not worth living and our humanity has been stripped of us if we are reduced to mere disposable cogs in a totalitarian machine. My life, given by God, does not exist to serve and obey the purposes of an authoritarian state. I will not be muzzled and I will not conform to ideologies I don't believe in. The state will not be my father or mother. The state will not be my God. It's no way to live. And the evidence from communist experiments around the world is that humans are not capable of such complete conformism as a whole anyway. It's a futile endeavor to even try this. Again, let me say this clearly. Freedom is messy. This side of heaven, we're going to have disagreements, we're going to offend one another. There will not be complete conformity, but that is good. I would rather have that freedom than government tyranny. Those who've been subjected to extreme collectivist regimes have found it unbearably oppressive in the past, and they couldn't leave fast enough. In the old Soviet Union, the government had to build walls to stop people escaping to the freedom of the West, and that's still the case in places like North Korea today. Those walls don't exist in North Korea to stop people getting into North Korea because it's such a paradise and everyone wants to live there. Those walls exist to stop people trying to get out to freedom. And nobody should have to live under such tyranny anyway, in fear of their government, afraid to express an unsanctioned opinion. And if we in the West don't want to find ourselves in that position in the years to come, we must change trajectory quickly. I watched an interview recently from a Chinese artist who escaped the communist regime there and went to live in the United States. He said that he's seeing the beginnings of Chinese-style communism beginning to creep in to his new country.
But certainly in United States, with today's condition, you can easily have an authoritarian. In many ways, you're already in the authoritarian state. You just don't know it.
How so?
Many things happens today in US can be compared to cultural revolution in China.
Like what?
Like people trying to be unified in certain political correctness. That is very dangerous.
He's not the only one who's escaped a communist regime and now sees the warning signs of that same authoritarianism creeping into the West. To quote just one other voice, Amy Fan West, who escaped communist Vietnam to live in California, she says, "What happened in my country that I fled from is happening here, and I want to prevent it. Please listen to those who escaped communism and socialism. Hear our voices. We are speaking the truth because we experienced it and we know there's no hope if we go down this path." They're not wrong. Recent reports suggest that already around 1/3 of UK millennials describe themselves as being communists, and around half of US Gen Z adults call themselves communists too. There's a lot of numbers floating around, but they're always far higher than what they should be. And as we keep on pursuing the soft virtues and post-modernity, this ideology is likely to become more apparent. More and more young people are going to look towards communism as the answer for peace, unity, and equality. So the 1967 love revolution isn't sounding like such a great idea anymore, is it? We started off by pursuing peace, love, and unity, and on the surface that sounded like a good idea, and we could certainly understand the motivation. But taken to extremes, virtues become vices, and monomaniacal fixation upon the soft virtues is creating a society of anti-intellectualism, ignorance, tyranny, authoritarianism, and a growing collectivism that is tending towards communism. And if the trench theory holds true, then believe it or not, we're just getting started on where this is all going to end up.